months ago, I moved, and it took me quite a few weeks until I acquired all the furniture and the appliances that I needed. And the last thing that I got was a microwave. And boy, I didn't know how much I love having a microwave until I didn't have one for over a month. Today, we're talking about microwave faith. Let's get to it. So let's pick up Jesus' genealogy where we left off last week in Matthew chapter 1, verse 3. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. We talked about them last week. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. Ram, the father of Amminadab. Amminadab, the father of Nahshon. Nahshon, the father of Salmon. Salmon. That's where we're going to end today. So here is a list of dudes that we really don't know much about. We got Perez, Hezron, Ram, Amminadab, Nahshon, and Salmon. All of these guys we know almost diddly squat about who they are and what they did, but we do have their names referenced in genealogies throughout the Bible. So not just in Matthew, but also in 1 Chronicles, in Ruth, and in Luke. But even though we don't know much about them, we do know what was happening at that time in history if you read the Bible. So from the story of Joseph, we learn that Judah and all of his kids, Perez included, they moved to Egypt because of the famine and because Joseph was going to take care of them in Egypt. In Exodus chapter 1, we discover that that entire generation died and a new Pharaoh rose to power that enslaved all of those people in very harsh slavery labor. So for 400 years, all of those people were enslaved in Egypt. So we don't know much about them, but we do know that they were slaves and that they probably lived very hard and mundane lives. Fun fact, did you know that this was actually prophesied to Abraham back in Genesis? Genesis chapter 15, verse 13, the Lord said to Abraham, "Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish that nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried in a good old age. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for your sins of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure." So even though these men, or at least 4 generations of them, they lived in this slavery, they were alive during this horrific time, they had this promise that God had given to Abraham that they could cling on to. This seems crazy to us because we're used to getting what we want and we're used to getting it now. I call it microwave faith.
I want my prayers to be answered now. I want God to give me the desires of my heart now. I want the coronavirus to be gone now.
All I want to do is push a few buttons, pray a little, give a tithe, serve at church, and then God will give me what I want. It's kind of like a microwave. So these men and their presence in the genealogy remind us that God has not called us to a perfectly easy, comfortable life. Sometimes we experience the answer to our prayer and we experience God's promises fulfilled in our lifetime, but sometimes we don't. And the question is, are we going to trust Him? So I want to end off today's video just reminding us of God's promises and reminding us that we can trust Him. This story is proof of that. I don't know where your life is at these days. Maybe, school is good, your job is good, and you're happy, or maybe your life has been chaotic and depressing. I mean, we've all been experiencing a lot of craziness with the coronavirus. A lot of us have been stuck at home and it's not been the best of times. So in these dark times, kind of like these men were experiencing the dark times of slavery, are we going to trust that God has a purpose, that He's with us, or are we going to lean on our own understanding? Let's remind ourselves today of God's amazing promises.
One of the greatest promises from God that I know is His faithfulness. He is a faithful God. He will never leave us or forsake us.
My favorite promise from God is when Moses met God from burning bush, and when he said, "Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you, speak and will teach you what to say."
For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. I love this promise of God because it just tells me, especially during this time, that God is with me and that I do not have to fear.
One of my favorite promises in God's word is in Deuteronomy 31 verse 6, where it says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And that is such a beautiful promise to know that God is going to be with me anywhere I go, and he will be with me forever.